Texas myself. It seems like you're about the fifth photographer, I think, from Austin, Texas, or based in Austin, Texas. So there's obviously something in the water there that helps people be immensely talented. So congratulations to anyone that's not living in England, but certainly congratulations for living somewhere that has such a amazing plethora of fantastically talented people. Before we go into your body of work, your directorial style, your retouching, all sorts, before we go into any of that, let's talk about why it is that you first picked up a camera. So what made you want to be a photographer? There's lots of different ways you could be creative. Why photography?
Well, I'm pretty creative in a lot of other avenues as well. I am a musician. I'm an actor, and I always liked the freedom I had with even just an iPhone before I picked up a camera, just to kind of, capture the world through my own just how I perceive things.
Right.
And my wife and I had started a t-shirt company, and it was just a side project. We wanted to our goal was to raise money for at-risk youth programs. And we ended up teaming up with this organization called Fly out of San Francisco. And specifically, they help kids coming out of juvie. Like the statistic is crazy. It's something close to 90% of kids that go to some sort of juvenile detention center in the US anyway, wind up in prison later. So whatever they're doing isn't working.
Yeah.
And so there are some really great organizations to help change that. And we really like that. So we made these t-shirts, and most of our, it was doing really well. And all of our sales were coming through Instagram. And so we were sending out a lot of t-shirts to influencers and things like that. But we decided it'd be a little bit more economical to take our own pictures. And so we started trying to do some things with the iPhone, and it just wasn't cutting it as far as quality. So it was my excuse to pick up a camera. And we decided on it was a Fuji X-T20, just sort of like a beginner travel camera in the Fuji line anyway. And I loved it. The t-shirt company became too much for either of us to handle. It was more than a side project. So we kind of stopped it altogether, but I kept the camera, and I got a kind of crash course in taking photography of people. I think before the t-shirt company, things I was interested in were more like insects. I took a lot of pictures on my phone of bees, and landscapes, but a lot of insects. But human beings are far more interesting to me now. They are anyway.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting dynamic with photography. I don't know, obviously in America, I've never lived there. I didn't grow up in America, but in England, a lot of people buy a camera as like a social crutch, as like a way of meeting people and a way of getting out there. And it's like an incredibly antisocial thing to have, especially of recent, because if you walk around with a camera, generally speaking, people put their guard up. Why has that guy got a camera? What's he up to? So it's kind of the anti-social crutch that is, the person that's holding it thinks it's helping, and sometimes it's not. And I've noticed a lot of people that when they get into photography, there seems to be a little bit of a divide. Some people immediately want to photograph people. People photography is where they want to go. That's the most important thing. And then if you don't want to photograph people, you're almost so against it that it's almost repulsive to you, the idea of photographing people. I don't know whether that's down to like a nerves thing or maybe just a hatred of the human race or something. I don't really know what it is, but what is it that you enjoy so much about photographing people in particular?
Well, it's funny that you say that, because when I first would take pictures of things. I enjoyed taking pictures, but I thought it would be so stupid to take pictures of people. I thought that was so far away from anything that I ever thought I would photograph. And I was forced into it through the t-shirt thing. And now it seems silly otherwise. Now taking pictures of anything other than human beings it seems a little silly to me. I take pictures of my dogs all the time. I have a bunch of pets, but I think there's capturing the human experience on this planet is just so interesting to me. And I think as I kind of grew as an actor and a photographer at the same time. And so my experience in both worlds is getting to know the human underneath, and almost like practicing this sort of empathy of putting myself in other people's shoes. And I'm able to do that in photography. I think my favorite thing is when my favorite thing about photographing humans is even if it's just a couple split seconds of being able to that I am able to capture someone in a completely vulnerable state. And it's so hard. It's so hard to let yourself be vulnerable, but it's my goal going into any shoot, that I am able to capture just at least a few frames of that person completely letting their guard down and not caring about how they look, and able to just be present with me. And I can feel it, it's the energy in that experience is very, it's my favorite thing about photography. So it keeps me going back. Absolutely.
Well, obviously you've built up an empathy for the other side of the camera, I guess, or the performative side of things from acting. So how much does your experiences in acting inform the way that, for example, that you direct when you're photographing people?
Yeah, so I am very adamant on and living a story. I tell everyone that I photograph that I don't think it's their job to look good for the camera, that I think it's the model's job to have an experience, and it's my job to capture it.
Right.
I don't think you can fake what I am trying to do. And it's why I'm drawn towards shooting, photographing performers instead of portraits for the everyday human necessarily, if that makes sense. I enjoy cultivating a space for an artist to work for another artist on the other side of the camera. And I think that does come from my acting. In my experience, it seems like the people that I photograph that aren't models or actors or something like that, well, not 100% of the time, most of the time they go into the photography session because they just want me to make them look good, and to me, that's just not what it's about. I would rather see those. I want to see those people not care about what they look like. And I want to see them in their most vulnerable mindset. And I think unless you practice that, then it's really, really hard to let yourself do that. And I am able to, I am able to give my clients that aren't models and actors a space to let themselves feel vulnerable if that's what they're interested in letting me capture. But for the most part, I have to go to the the other artists, the artists on the other side of the camera.
Well, it's a contrasting argument I've heard from different people on the podcast, and it first come up. So I've only ever been to, I don't want to lie here, but I feel like I've only ever been to one workshop run by a photographer. And it was pretty much the person who I think, because I'm a wedding photographer, I think I'm a bit biased here, but I think they're the best wedding photographer in the world, and in a way, the best photographer in the world because of that for me. And one of the biggest tips that they gave was about matching energy. And when you're working with someone in front of the camera, his interpretation was that you have to kind of be at their energy level, be at their enthusiasm level. And that way you kind of cultivate a relationship through energy. And I've spoken to other people who have said that you need to, as the photographer, you need to kind of lead by example. You need to have an energy level almost above, or an enthusiasm above that of the subject. And in my experience, I actually find that not being as true, but I think it's down to the personality. And something I've seen a lot of with developing photographers is that they have an idea of what they think a photographer is, and they act in that manner, but it's not true to who they are as a person, and it alienates the person that they're photographing. And because they're acting out of character, it doesn't come across as genuine. And humans are very good, I think, at picking up on, I mean, other than California, I think humans are very good at picking up on genuine versus sort of staged personalities. So for you, are you trying to match the energy of the subject? Are you trying to like push them to be more positive and more enthusiastic? Are you going in like full teeth grinning, or are you someone that's kind of happy to see how the subject is and work to their energy level?
I think it depends on, well, so every photo session that I have, I spend about 10, sometimes longer, 10 to 15 minutes just building rapport with my subject. And I have this speech that I give, basically encouraging them to let themselves be real in front of the camera. And as far as matching energy levels and things like that, I think, yeah, absolutely. I think it is up to me to set the tone for the shoot. And if I am able to show them that I can be vulnerable with them, then in my experience, it's been much easier for them to let themselves just be themselves and not try to perform for the camera, which is what I want. I don't want anyone to think that they have to perform. I want them to let me see their soul. Right. I want to be able to capture those vulnerable moments. But I think I actually got really bored with photography at the beginning when I kind of moved from shooting natural light into the studio because I really liked studio work, and there wasn't a lot of great studio work in Texas. And so I moved that way, and my focus was absolutely on like posing and making sure my lights were correct. And it was 100% about manufacturing this perfect image. But I got bored. I got bored with it really quickly. And not that I'm still, I'm always a student of light, but once I felt confident enough in my ability to compose an image, then there was something missing. And I think it was that I wasn't spending enough time on the human being. I was focused on the end result instead of being present with the subject. And now, I mean, that's my favorite part. I do as much as possible in camera, and I spend as little time as possible on my computer, because I'd rather spend 3 hours for just a few images on set than I would 10 minutes to grab an image and then spend the rest editing.
Well, yeah, editing is, I personally, it's been the hardest thing for me with photography is my disdain for editing. I can't stand it.
Yeah.
And I can't stand sitting in front of a computer. And I think the problem with editing is that there's so many interpretable variables that unless you are willing to draw a line in the sand, it's something that just is a never ending cycle. And for me, I always say self-hatred's a great motivator, but it's not particularly great at helping you draw a line in the sand. And I continuously go in circles about whether or not an image is good enough. Have I ruined it? Has the editing done this? Has it done that? And it's honestly the most miserable part of photography for me. And I've had to go through a little bit of let's say a thing, because I don't really know how to describe it, but a bit of a mental thing for the last year to try and figure out what I want photography to be. And like you said, it's not sitting in front of a computer for hours to get an image to look a certain way. That's not what I want to do photography for. I'm assuming based on the camera that you said that you picked up initially, that you haven't been shooting for a tremendous amount of time. How long have you actually been doing photography for?
About 3 years.
I'm getting very frustrated with this podcast. The amount of people I speak to who have significantly better work than me, who've been doing it for a lot less time. It's becoming very irritating.
No.
Okay, so let's talk about subjects. Let's talk about models. Let's talk about people that you're photographing. What are the qualities of a good subject for you?
I mean, I feel like I've said vulnerability 100 times already, but I think being able to, if someone is willing to not care about the final image on their side. Sometimes I'll work with people and they are also trying to compose the final image. And to me, I think that takes away from the experience and the magic that can happen if you are able to let go. And so I think my favorite people to photograph are the ones that really don't give a shit, about how they look. They're willing to try something new. They don't care about if they might look silly doing one thing or another. They will just go for it 150%. And anytime I photograph, I'm using a lot of movement. I almost photograph like I'm videotaping instead of taking still photography. And I encourage the subjects to do the same. I never really tell anyone to hold a pose or anything. Mm-hmm. It's very constant, and so then it's very much like a dance. Because I'm moving around a lot, and the subject is moving around a lot. And so my favorite people to photograph are the ones that are willing to let themselves have an experience there. And I think it can be very liberating to use the space instead of just to use the studio or use the time, whatever, to make a pretty picture. I just think that's the easy part. I think making the pretty picture is the easy part. I think the hard part and the more interesting part to me is the poetry of it all. And like I said before, I don't think you can fake it. So I think my favorite people to photograph are the ones that are.
Can I jump in there? Because if you've got this dance, and I and also it's very funny when English people say dance to an American that say dance. I'm sorry about that, but with this dance, the other side of it, and you know, I've got a wonderful friend who's a photographer, and he is very, very much a fan of, or not a fan, but he takes huge inspiration from photographers that do that have that movement and that freeness. I don't even know really what the word is, but that kind of the life that's in the images where it's like, you know, there's lots of kinetic energy coming from both sides of the camera. And sometimes it just misses by a mile, but when it hits harder than you could ever pose something. And watching him shoot, he's terrified to not be in control of the situation, to not be in control, like to not stop things and sort of micromanage posing or micromanage expression. And it completely goes against the end product that he's trying to get. So the other side of the dance on your part as the photographer, is it about sort of being free to take terrible photos in the process to lead to that moment when both sides connect and it's just like a step above you could ever get if you were being controlled and having a much higher hit rate?
Yeah, absolutely. And on both sides, and I think that's something that I have to help convince the people that I model, is that it's okay to go through the stupid looks and stupid moves, you know, the things that are going to look awful, but it's okay to move through those. Because when I shoot it, and when I say it's like a dance, it's because I'm anticipating. I'm always anticipating what they're going to do next. I'm not trying to. It's not once I see something, I want to go back to it. When there is that rhythm happening, then I'm able to start to see what's going to happen next. And so I'm catching those moments, and anticipating when they happen, just a split second. And yeah, and sometimes I miss it by a mile. And, but I do think it's worth it. I think, and anything, and it's something that, another thing that I tell the people that I shoot with is to move as if move like it's a game, like you're not allowed to stop moving. And if you're continuing to do that and you're not stopping, you're never stopping to think, oh, maybe I should put my leg here, or maybe I should put my arm here, that would look good. Yep. If you get rid of all of that and you're just constantly moving and exploring, and then you are going to come up with far better, quote unquote, poses. I don't really ever use that term. I like to use the word actions instead. Mm-hmm. But I'm going to capture far better poses than either of us could manufacture if you're moving freely. And I think that's why I like fashion photography, because you can be so weird, you know, mm-hmm. so expressive, like an interpretive dance, and it looks cool. Or you can do nothing, or you can sit on the damn floor and stare up at the ceiling. And if it's real to you, then it's going to be real to us. You know, it's going to be real to whoever is looking at the picture.
Well, I feel bad for doing this to the people listening, because I'm going to do it to you here as well. And unfortunately, it's going to work on me. But it's like conscious breathing, right? Like if I point out that you're breathing, you become aware of it, you are then unable to do it without thinking about it. And when you take over someone's motion, you take over their posing, their fluidity, the actions that they're doing, they're not going to fall the same way. It's not going to look the same way. It's not going to convey. And again, humans are psychopathically strange at picking up on body language when it looks unnatural, even to like the smallest degree. It's just a fascinating thing that when you take control of the posing too much, I think it lets down not only the end products, but it also takes away from the skill set and the personality of the person being photographed in the way that they hold themselves. You can't put the same, to sound profoundly English here, but you can't stick the same rod up everybody's arse and expect them to be the same height. You know, you've got to understand that different people are different, and you've got to enjoy it. You've got to enjoy that sometimes you're going to work with someone that's going to push you in a direction that you wouldn't normally shoot in a certain way. And then there's going to be other people that are exactly perfect for the way that you shoot, that it's going to be easier than shooting fish in a barrel. And that's the fun of photography. That's why you photograph people, for the challenge in between the two.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think, it's funny because I think some of the subjects that have been hardest for me to photograph are the models that have been working for a very, very long time and know, they know what looks good. And so it's really hard for me to convince them that they are going to look good no matter what they do. And to just play. And you're right. I don't ever want anyone to feel like they're posing. So
yep.
if I'm talking about posing at all, then that's, then it is, then it becomes more presentational to me. And that's just not what I'm interested in. It's just not satisfying to me as an artist, I suppose, to do that. And I think that comes from the fact that it is, especially with the technology that we have now, it's a little bit easier to make something that looks really cool.
Yep.
So then I don't want it. Then I want it to feel cool. I want to be able to feel something when I look at an image,
That's the thing, right? There is something specifically about the digital age of art that has taken away the feel. You hear the same thing from, I used to be in music myself. You see it with photography, you see it with movies. There's something about the digital process of making something that has turned it into a little bit of a soulless thing. And I don't want to sound like a hipster because I shoot digital. And I think it's more about the process on which you are recording the art that you're making. So like whatever medium you're recording to tends to inform you on how you should behave. If you're recording something to tape or to film, you are kind of more okay with the warts and all approach of there being little imperfections and there being things that don't exactly make it perfect, but they make it perfect for the moment. And it becomes more of about the moment it was recorded in, the moment it was photographed in. Whereas with digital, it feels like you can always go back and go over those indiscretions over and over again until they're gone. And it takes all of the feeling out of what you're creating to make something that's like clinically fine, but not in any way serving. I mean, this sounds like the most pretentious shit, but it's not serving to the soul. It's not something that really speaks to anybody. It's just people will say, yep, that looks cleanly done. That looks technically correct. Well done. And then they double tap and they scroll on, or they flick to the next song or whatever. It doesn't have any connection with the person that actually receives the art at the end of the process.
I think we're all very attracted to vulnerability, but we're so afraid to let ourselves be vulnerable. And I'm going to keep running that word into the ground until I find a better one. But one of my biggest inspirations is Peter Lindbergh, and what I liked about what he did with photography is he put a focus on the human experience and the human over the product.
Yeah.
And I thought that's wonderful. And what I think he did, that people want to see that, because he was notorious for like no makeup and no editing and things like that. And people ate that shit up. They loved it. And we all thought before that it had to be, we're trying to manufacture something perfect because we thought that's what people were more attracted to. And he kind of, I think he kind of turned that on its head. And I see it in the people that I photograph. I've heard so many times that from the people that I photograph that I've never had an experience like that. They'll say like, oh, that felt really good. I felt like I could just play, I felt like I could just do whatever. I felt completely comfortable to do that here. And I'd never, no photographer had ever talked to me like that, like gave me gave me a speech, like you did beforehand to set the stage and set the goal for what we were trying to do. And to me, especially since I've started shooting that way, the response that I get from my fans is really remarkable, And so I think it isn't true that it has to be perfect. And I think people are getting, we're in this little like period with art on a lot of different levels where people need it to be, are trying to control it to be perfect. And I don't think people are going to last very long with that, because I just don't think it's satisfying to anybody. It's not very satisfying to look at. And I think that's kind of across the board. You might not know exactly what it is that makes it feel off, but I think people will, hopefully, my hope for humanity is that people won't buy into it for too long.
So let's move on from the subjects. Let's talk about you and your website in particular. So I'm currently in the process. I had a good old fashioned mental breakdown with my work, destroyed everything, started again from scratch, which I think is the second time I've done that, and stripped my website back. And I'm completely rebuilding my website, rebuilding the way that my portfolio is seen. And the hardest part for me at the moment is figuring out the way to section the work that I do. And I guess this is more just for me, so I understand where you're coming from, but I feel like this is something that people maybe don't talk about or don't think to talk about, but it's quite an interesting approach, really. So your portfolio is broken down into 3 groups, which is on your website is studio, natural, and headshots. So what's the thinking behind breaking it down that way?
Well, I might change that, but I mean, and I haven't, because I haven't figured out a better way to separate them. But I wanted there to be a distinction in my work that's in studio and my natural light work. And so that was, those were the 2 that I just had for a while. And I think there's just, part of it is for different kinds of clients. A client might want to know what my studio work looks like versus what, if they wanted to shoot something natural light. Now, it's interesting that most of the work that I book doesn't look anything like what I advertise. And I haven't figured out why these people book me. And I guess that's sort of Texas. Everything is very commercial. It doesn't look like the editorial style that I really like to shoot. That's right. More New York, but and so I don't even advertise that. And that is, the vast majority of the work that I get is in the commercial realm. But yeah, I think, just this very basic note, just separating the two, because to me, they feel completely different. The studio work that I like to do is very moody and dark, and I use a lot of shadows, and then my natural light stuff is a lot brighter. And then the headshots, I guess just since I'm an actor, I have a separate, people want a specific kind of headshot. And so I just want to show exactly, I want them to know exactly what they're going to get when they book me for a headshot.
I mean, you mentioned there about your shadows on your studio work, and it's something that I've got in terms of your style. I mean, I'm a big fan of, there needs to be a black point in an image. I don't like sort of images that are just non-contrasty, very in the middle, very inoffensive. I like for something like that, for a decision to be made. And I do like a good strong black point, deep shadows. I think it adds a lot of mood. And like you said, there is a real contrast between your studio work and your natural work or your outdoor work, or however we're defining it, in the sense that it looks like you're in a much better mood when you're outdoors, and then when you're in a studio, you're in a much you can be maybe in a bit more of a fierce mood. Sure. I have to ask, are you doing your own retouching? Because I know obviously we've already talked about not enjoying it.
I am. I have worked with a few retouchers, and I haven't found the right fit yet. For a lot of the retouchers that I work with seem to want to really retouch the images, and I haven't been able to convince anyone not to do that. And so it's the couple times that I've tried, or I've tried about 4 times with 4 different retouchers that I have reached out to, and it seems to instead just be more work going back and forth than it would just to do the retouching myself. I think also because the retouching that I do is I try to more so now. I used to do a lot more, and now the retouching that I like, where I'm happy with it, is very, very minimal.
And one thing I always do find fascinating with photography, especially people like yourself, who I don't think there are that many photographers that are particularly good at black and white. I think a lot of photographers, and maybe this is just where I'm coming from the wedding world, but it feels like a lot of photographers tend to make an image black and white when they just can't get it right color-wise, and they just kind of make it black and white, and they think that that's a sort of fix-all solution to an image that's just not quite working. With you, you really know, and I tend to not like photographers. This sounds a bit bitchy, but I tend to not really like photographers that don't do a lot of black and white, and are certainly not good at it. With yourself, really punchy black and whites, but there's still that clarity, there's the contrast, but there's still the detail. It's great. What informs you that an image is a black and white image compared to a color image?
Actually, I preview all of my images in black and white on the Fuji while I'm shooting.
Mm-hmm.
And even when I send all of the proofs, all of the previews to my clients, I send them all in black and white. And so I prefer them to be in black and white, and I'll only turn them to color if someone really wants color. Very reluctantly, I guess. Yeah. And I like color. I like experimenting with color, but, and I, it does depend on the image, but I think the vast majority of the images that I think black and white, it's easier to, you're just not distracted by the color. Yeah. There's a lot of information there. And so if it's in black and white, then I think the attention and the focus goes on to the goes more into the subject and what's going on in their head, when that photo was taken. And and I think color, while very pretty, can just be distracting for that.
I also think that, like, as time goes on, you're more likely to look back at your color work and want to have done it differently. Like, your taste will change a lot more with color work than it will with black and white. I feel like black and white, I know a lot of people say it's like timeless, which is, it depends on the image. I mean, there's a lot of, I have like a blind hatred for things that date a photo. So I really can't stand modern cars. I really can't stand mobile phones. It's like, obviously this is more of a wedding thing, but I can't stand them appearing in photos because it really dates an image, especially now, to a time when I don't really like, the time that we're living in. So I guess that's an issue as well. But yeah, I shoot on digital, I shoot everything in black and white on the camera, and I'm previewing everything in black and white purely because I'm focusing on composition, shadows, and highlights, and everything else can kind of fuck off and not distract me while I'm focusing on what I'm doing. You've mentioned Fuji a couple times now. Today is a new camera day for me, and this is definitely not sponsored by Fuji. My bank account can assure you of that, but I'm a Sony shooter, but today I actually took delivery of a camera I've wanted for quite a while, which is a Fuji X Pro 3. I'm very excited to have gotten that, and I'm literally just giving myself a bit of a hype here for the fact that I finally got one. What are you using in the way of gear? What are your lenses? What's your camera?
A new camera day. That's exciting. I just upgraded to the Fuji GFX 100S.
Wow.
The medium format. And it is a beast. I really wanted, I had the XT4 before that. I still have it. That's what I use for my any video work that I do. Mm-hmm. But I wanted to hate the 100S. I really did, because it was so expensive. But I was blown away by the depth that I could get out of the medium 4. And I kind of skipped a step. The XT4 is a cropped sensor, and so I skipped the full frame and went straight to the medium format. And I mean the image quality is. I will never shoot. I love that XT4, and I shot on it forever. I will never shoot on that. I'll never shoot stills on that again, because the 100S is excellent. I mostly use the 80 millimeter 1.7 with the GFX.
Wowzers, that is a hell of a setup.
That's my go-to. It's my hand hurts. It's a lot bigger than my other camera. I'm like cramping in one of my fingers. I've had it for a while. I haven't gotten used to it, because my other camera I could hold with one hand, and this one it's a two-hander. It's definitely a two-hander.
Well, it's funny. I was diagnosed with arthritis a few years ago, and I was talking to someone a couple of days ago about the GFX cameras, and they said, "Oh, have you ever thought about it?" And it's like, honestly, I don't know if I'd be physically able to use one for extended periods of time without just being in agony. And they honestly thought I was joking. And having used very briefly I think it's the 50S that I used. Mm-hmm. I wasn't joking. Like, that's a hell of a camera that you're holding on to a lot of equipment.
Yeah. No, it's definitely taking. It's a lot to get used to. Absolutely. Because the XT4 is tiny. It's almost like people use it for travel cameras.
I had XT3s, and it's like you could put 3 or 4 in a bag that you could only get 2 full frames in, and there would be room for them to rattle. I mean, they are very small cameras. They're great for the size and everything. They're fantastic cameras. It's just, they are very small. They're so small, in fact, that you almost have to have a grip with them to make them more manageable if you have bigger hands, because they're almost too small.
Yeah, I did. I bought the battery grip for when I worked in studio for the XT4.
So you've mentioned a couple times there about motion doing video work. We're about to wrap up, and I really do appreciate how much time you've taken for this. Is the motion side of things, is the video work something you just organically went into as a sort of a side part of what you're doing with the photos, or are you looking to do something more with the video side? Would you like to do more video work, or is it something that you kind of do reluctantly? What's the video work doing for you?
Yeah, I didn't really get into any video work until I upgraded to the XT4, and that camera, I've always had Fuji's before that, and this was the first one that had IBIS, and it also shoots at 240 frames if I want it, so it makes really gorgeous video that I'd never been able to play with before. And so when I got that camera, I started experimenting with some video work, and I like it. I like it was a pretty natural transition, especially because the way I shoot my still photography is so much. I could be recording the whole thing and it would almost look exactly the same. You wouldn't be able to tell if I was taking, besides seeing the flashes go off in studio, but you wouldn't be able to tell that I was taking still photography. You would think I was taking a video. And so I just took that same, that same attitude and just recorded some things instead. And I think now what I want to do is be able to mix the two. I mean, I really like seeing that movement anyway. And a lot of my clients wanted video also. And so it kind of, that did force me to learn how to do a few things with it. So I'm able to offer it. But as far as the fashion work and things like that, I do really like being able to, to capture a full motion of things,
right, along
with taking the still images. So just this past, I got the GFX about a month ago. And so ever since I've had that, I use the GFX for my still photography, and every session I do the stills on that. And then I use the XT4 for some video as well. And so I'm trying to do that with every shoot that I do.
So this is always the hardest question. This is our last question. And this is always the hardest one for people that photograph like fashion or portraits or anything like that. I find this is the question that they have the most trouble answering. So I've let you warm up plenty, and then we get to this, and I'll see whether or not you are going to dance around it and avoid it, or if you're going to be able to give me a definitive answer. If you could have one person, and we'll take sentimentality out of the way. So, we'll remove like family and stuff from the equation, but who would be your ideal subject right now? If I said to you, I can book you any one person in the world, you get to do an editorial with, you get to do a shoot with, you get to do some motions, some stills. Who are you picking?
Ooh, it's a hard one. It reminds me, did you ever have like Napster or LimeWire?
Yeah.
Any of the music downloaded? And when you first download it, you have this idea that you're just going to download all the things, and then you can't think of a single one.
Yep.
I would actually love to photograph someone like Meryl Streep. I think. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. I mean, it's very strange for me to get a straight answer like that.
And I think I would gear towards an actor, because then I could, in a perfect world, I'd love I love to just be able to talk story with
Uh-huh.
with a person. And I feel like an actor like that is someone that works their entire life to be able to let themselves just be in the story and not feel like they have to present something. And that's kind of the quality that I look up to. So yeah, being able to work with someone whose profession and vocation is to let themselves be, my favorite word, let themselves be vulnerable with me, then that would just be, there's so much depth. I think even with a lot of my favorite models, they're very, very reluctant to let themselves feel anything. I am able to extract a few real moments where I get to see how they really feel.
Uh-huh.
But it's not necessarily something that they're interested in. Not all of them, but for the most part, it's not really something they're not interested in emotion or that kind of, that kind of experience. But an actor is that, that's the meat, that's the meat for them. That's what, that's their goal going into any time they work, is to be able to, and I'm not speaking for every actor, but all of my favorites, they are going into work, they're going into a play or a movie or whatever it is, with the goal of releasing themselves to the story, and it not being about them. And I just find that fascinating. So being able to take pictures of someone like that would be a dream come true. Sure.
Well, I definitely appreciate you being vulnerable for this podcast and giving me a lot of nice honesty. See what I did there? I helped you out. I said it once, so now it's both of us.
Thank you.
I do appreciate you taking the time to do this. I really do. I know it's there's better things to be doing than listening to an English person try and speak their own language, which most of us struggle with. So the most important thing with this, as I mentioned to you before we start, is I want as many people as possible to like the things that I like, so I become my own algorithm, and then more of what I like appears, and I'm almost a self-fulfilling prophecy of selfishness. So to do that, I need you to tell people where they can go to find all of your amazing work. So Instagram, website, where do you want people to go?
Yeah, my website is, my last name is caballeropictures.com. And my Instagram is also Caballero Pictures.
I'm going to speak completely candidly here about especially what I know of people in the UK.
Mm-hmm.
I would definitely spell Caballero for people so they can find it for sure.
Yeah, that's a good idea. All right. Caballero Pictures is CABALLERO pictures.com. And Instagram is the same, CABALLERO pictures.
If you do ever get the chance, watch an English, I think you guys call it the Premier League, but it's the Premier League. Watch a match from English football, and then just wait for someone with an even remotely foreign sounding name to come on and listen to the way that the commentators pronounce their name. It's always hilarious. We play with foreign language the same way that America played with the metric system, which was like extremely reluctantly, and then we just did whatever we wanted straight away anyway. So I really do appreciate you taking the time to do this. I can't tell you how much of a privilege it is for me to have so many fantastic people that are willing to give up their time and talk about what they do. I really do appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for having me, Kris. It was a pleasure.